Hi, this is Suzanne, and you're listening to Sex Advice for Seniors. And today I'm with someone speaking about a topic that I only recently heard about, and you might have heard about it, called Widow's Fire. Well, we'll talk about it. I don't want to spoil things here, so I'm not going to spoil things. I'm just going to say that we're going to talk about Widow's Fire, and we're going to talk about dating after becoming a widow. And to talk about that with me is a woman called Nicky Wake, and she herself was widowed at 49, I believe,
That's right.
and subsequent to that, tried to, see if she could meet someone else. And in her, I'm expecting that, like many of us, she discovered that online dating's a bit of a what was it that somebody called it? A fire sale or something like that. Anyway, and she started chapter 2 dating to try and overcome some of the problems that widows and widowers face when they're trying to meet somebody after the death of a significant other. So welcome, Nikki.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
And so when did you start chapter 2 dating?
So,
Yeah.
I started chapter 2 dating in 2022. So I was widowed in 2020. That was actually after my husband had been ill for a very long time. So he'd spent 3 years in a nursing home,
Well,
incapacitated with a brain injury. So technically I was widowed in 2020, but arguably I'd kind of been widowed in 2017. I was emotionally widowed, but technically married in my mind in 2017. So I started dating again probably in about 2021. And as you described it, I discovered. So I'd met my husband online originally back in 2002. So I knew it worked.
oh, wow.
Um, but yeah, we were real early adopters of that tech.
Golden
And
age, Nikki,
yes,
golden
indeed.
age.
Pioneers, I like to think. And and so I knew it worked. So I got myself online, but my goodness, I downloaded this thing called Tinder. And obviously online dating had changed enormously in 17 years. And it was like the Wild West, I described it actually, as full of dick pics and ghosting and married men and I thought, "Do you know what I need? I need a widower because he would understand what I'm going through because it's quite complex
Yeah.
dating as a widow because as you know, it's, there's feelings of guilt and complexities and this thing called widow's fire, which we'll talk about shortly. And I thought I need someone who understands this. So ideally one that looks like George Clooney. And so I thought, well, there must be a website for widows and widowers. And I went online and there wasn't. And I was sort of incredulous. And I'm an entrepreneur. I run a big events company and sort of the stuff. And I could smell an opportunity. And so I went out and I raised some cash and I launched Chapter 2 Dating, which is our serious dating site for widows who are looking for their Chapter 2, their next chapter in life. And chapter 2 is a phrase that's used widely within the widow circle. And that was great. And we had, huge amounts of interest from the press and the media. We had lots of sign-ups. It was all going incredibly well. And I was, continuing to try and date, usually with disastrous effects. I mean, it's hysterical. I get quoted in the press as a relationship and dating expert, and yet my love life is more woeful than most. And actually I realized my problem was I wasn't ready for my chapter 2.
Yeah.
But I was being driven almost crazy by this thing that I then discovered was called widow's fire.
Mm.
So widow's fire is a recognized phenomenon. I thought it was just me being greedy, but actually it's a recognized phenomenon that when you're grieving, you ache for physical comfort and intimacy. I mean, if you think about it, I shared my bed for, nearly 17 years with my wonderful husband. And I spent 17 years teaching him how to love this body. And he got quite good at it in the end. And all of a sudden that is ripped from you and
Mm.
leaves a huge void and a physical ache and need and want. And this thing was raging in me that, I'd kind of do anything I could and that was called Widow's Fire. And so all of this was going on while chapter 2 was doing really well. And I thought, well, maybe, just maybe, we could be a bit naughty and start a bit of a hookup app for widows and widowers called Widow's Fire. So we did. So in 2023, June 2023, we launched widowsfire.dating, which is literally a hookup site for widows and widowers who are looking for casual fun. And actually, it's quite interesting because they're all over the world. So people are using it virtually, not just for one-to-ones?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. How fascinating. Cause what happened to me was I was with somebody, not for, for a few years, not for, like, a very long time, and he had liver cancer,
Mhm.
and he eventually died, and that was and he'd come along at the end of my longish marriage, decade-long marriage, and then had a few years with him, and so I felt like I'd had a bit of a rocky marriage and then this kind of alcoholic, crazy boyfriend, and then when he died, it was like, I don't know if it was a combination of widow's fire and just being totally fed up, frankly. And also, because at that point, I was at the time that you met your husband, so my thing went on back in 2001,
Mhm.
2002, when the internet and dating was
Yep.
actually super fun. I mean, it was great, and I just wanted to get laid all the time in that way, that widow's fire kind of way, and the internet was full of really interesting people back then who were very up for facilitating that
Mhm.
for me, and so, yeah, I used some hookup sites, but I didn't really I mean, honestly, I just met so many amazing people back then and just had such a good time, and I ended up putting that into a book that became very successful.
Alright, excellent.
I did get my money everybody got their money's worth out of that period of time, but it wasn't until recently that somebody actually put the name Widow's Fire to it because
Mhm.
I didn't know it had a name.
Yeah.
I kind of thought in myself, as you said, I thought, well, it kind of makes sense that when somebody's lost, your body has the urgency to kind of almost replace the human being that has gone with, you
I think
know
it's that, but I also think it gives you a bit of a live for the moment attitude when you
Yeah,
lose someone. It makes you realize that actually tomorrow isn't guaranteed. And
yeah,
so you might not make it to a second date. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and then like, what the hell? Life is too short and life can and does change in a heartbeat. And when you lose someone close to you, so I think a combination of the two things, of the being robbed of the intimacy overnight almost,
yeah,
and then they're like, well, what the hell? You know, why wouldn't I? Right?
yeah.
And I've got nothing to lose, almost. And I think the combination of those 2 things is a really heady mix that drives you in a very primeval way,
Yes.
beyond logic and sense and reason and all of those things. And,
Yeah.
yeah, and therefore Widow's Fire is, it is a very real thing. And I've spoken to lots and lots of widows, and we've surveyed lots of widows. And, I think something like 84% of widows we surveyed recognized that they'd had some sort of widow's fire. They hadn't necessarily acted on it, but they'd
Yeah.
certainly experienced that feeling.
Yeah. And one of the toughest things when you're getting a dating site going, because I tried to launch one several years ago, just before the pandemic, called Not Dead Yet Dating.
I like it. I might steal that one.
Yeah, look, I got a logo for it and everything. It looks
Mhm,
really good. I did everything. But the problem that I had at the time, and I don't know if you because of you starting before all of I don't know if you started before all the GDPR stuff, but basically what I found was I was gonna I was gonna build my dating site off the back of another very large dating sites database and
mhm.
kind of filter out the people of a certain age group that I
Yeah.
thought might become part of our site. And then a bunch of legislation came into the UK, the GDPR, and I couldn't do that. And the thought of starting from scratch,
Yeah,
I just
the customer acquisition is one of the
that's
biggest
what
challenges we face. Yeah.
yeah, so that was what the tough bit for me was, like, I couldn't figure out, like, how the hell was I gonna get started? So, was it just off the back of all the publicity and things that got you the first users?
Yeah, I mean, we did incredibly well in the PR. So my story, I talk very openly and very rawly about my own personal experiences of being widowed and about my sex life, and the media really love that. I mean, my poor teenage son is mortified that his mother is regularly in the Daily Mail in the UK discussing her sex life, but he will get the inheritance one day. So,
He can join my kids, okay? Your kids and my kids can just meet up for my
They
kids are
need a therapy group, I think. Yeah, it probably wasn't part of his plan, was it? But yeah, and it's quite funny because my husband would be rolling in his grave quite literally at the idea of me discussing our sex life in the Daily Mail. But yeah, we got loads and loads of press and PR. I mean, there isn't a woman's magazine in the UK that I haven't been in.
yeah,
You know, my friends had phoned me from the hairdressers in a kind of, do you know that you're in Cosmo this week? Yeah, you know, I'm just so this week alone, I've got 3 podcasts, two
oh,
TV
great.
interviews, and a radio interview. So I do a lot of PR, and I talk very vocally, openly, and that really helped us grow the numbers. But we advertise a lot on Facebook. Facebook is used a lot, as you'll know, by
Yeah.
the slightly older generation. You know, our target market is the kind of on average, we do have some younger widows, but on average, 50 plus kind of market. And Facebook is a lot where those people hang out. And we're building something called the Widow Collective, which is a community site, a not for profit for widows and widowers who want to be part of a community so that it's not just about dating. Because obviously, we want to talk to widows very early in their journey before they even contemplate the idea of dating to give them support. And we built this amazing database of widows and widowers who come to us, find happiness, and then we lose a reason to talk to them anymore. And the Widow Collective gives us that opportunity and that touch point with them to keep them engaged with us going forward and to provide some really invaluable support and advice to the widow community in general. You know, being widowed is incredibly isolating and lonely, and if we can create some sort of support group for that, then hopefully we're doing some good in the world too.
And one of the things that struck me about this, because I've spoken to somebody in the States who just basically did dating advice for widowers and widows, because a bit like you, what they discovered was that things have moved on considerably since they may have gotten married or first gotten together with their partner. And so suddenly they're in this world where, people are ghosting, as you say, gaslighting, all the stuff
Mhm.
that goes on, right, with dating. And they're a bit freaked out by the whole thing and they don't know quite how to behave. Have you found that along the way you've had to become a bit of a coach, like a dating coach, to deal
Yeah, I
with
mean,
all of this?
yeah, I mean, I think my members really do, know they can reach out to me personally with queries. You know, I will get emails from people going, "I had the approach from this guy. You know, what should I do and how should I?" And of course, I offer advice where I can and help. Although, as I said, you know, it's like the blind leading the blind. Really, they taking relationship advice from me. Although I have actually managed something approaching a fully functional relationship for the last 5 months. So yeah, watch this space. And actually, it's somebody I met ironically on Widow's Fire. So I met him as I had this rule that I wouldn't use Chapter Two, wouldn't use my own dating site because it feels morally wrong to be taking money off you, for example, to um to then cream off the better men for myself. So I thought I can't do that. That's wrong. But then I was away on holiday. I was in Alaska actually, and I was a bit lonely and a bit horny, and I got a message from someone on Widow's Fire, and I thought, oh, he's hot, and you know why not? And so I arranged a meeting for a date when I was back in the UK. And we had a good go at extinguishing our widow's fire, but we discovered that actually we quite liked each other. So yeah, I've been dating him. So my widow's fire has actually turned into what I think might be my chapter two, which is quite a nice PR story,
Ah.
which I no doubt I'll be parading after Christmas. He said give him till Christmas before I put him in the Daily Mail. So yeah, I will do that. So widow's fire doesn't always stay as widow's fire; it can become something more.
No, I think that's absolutely true, and I think the thing about the I mean, for me, what I enjoyed during that period of time, that early period of time, whether it was widow's fire or I was just really horny all the time, I don't know, was the fact that I I was in a better place in emotionally to deal with men on a level that was different than I had in my youth, you know?
Mhm,
I was much more kind of mature about the whole thing and realistic about, well, this is just fun. This has the potential to be more than fun, or, this isn't fun at all. So I was much more kind of discriminating in some ways around the people that I met and how serious or not so serious I wanted to take
mhm.
the relationship. whereas back when I was younger, anyone who came along, I think I was just a little bit more like, "Oh my god, there's someone who likes me. This is great." Now that I'm much older, I'm not so impressed if you like me, that's nice, but it's like, I gotta like you back.
Yeah,
So,
and I think you have a greater level of confidence, don't you?
yeah,
And you're less body conscious, I think, as you get older, or I certainly feel, much more assured in who I am,
yeah,
and that affects your whole attitude going into dating and sex.
yeah.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think, 50s is when I've hit my stride on that front. So yeah, bring it on. I think it's none of that teenage fumbling, is it? So it's
No,
much better than it was.
absolutely. And of the 2 sites, is one more popular than the other or more successful?
Chapter 2 is more popular purely because we can advertise it on Facebook.
Right,
We're not
okay,
allowed to advertise Widows Fire on Facebook because Mark Zuckerberg thinks it's an adult site, and I guess it kind of is really. So
yeah,
that's our only restriction. I think Widows Fire would be massive if I could take it mainstream. But what we do is we recruit through Chapter 2, and then we cross sell to our audience to Widows Fire. And
yeah,
then we do place some ads with other big established dating sites, allow you to run banner ads on their
yeah,
platforms. So we do a bit of that. So yeah, definitely Chapter 2 is the bigger of the 2 sites, but Widows Fire is growing every day. We have a very loyal with Chapter 2, people tend to join, find their Chapter 2 and leave. Whereas the Widows Fire audience stick around because, it's an ongoing thing is Widows Fire, shall we say, and variety is indeed the spice of life. So
yeah, so let's talk about backing up a bit. What some aspects of dating that people are concerned about or should be careful about, or just some tips when you're looking for a partner after becoming a widow?
yeah, I mean, obviously, safety first is the first thing. So we try and vet every single person who joins the site. I personally review every profile
Yeah,
because we're at the size where we can still do that, which is great. So that gives a greater degree of security that, we ask people, if we're not sure, we ask people to verify their widowed status by either giving us a copy of a death certificate or a link to an obituary or a memorialized Facebook page, etc. Although I'm pretty good at spotting a widow or widower kind of fake, where I can. But obviously safety first, to keep all communication on site. Don't arrange to meet anybody apart from in a public place. Don't exchange numbers and never ever give anyone bank details. If anyone asks you for money, then it's a scam. I think to take things slowly, I think is actually a good piece of advice. I think as a widow, you're almost on the rebound. You've lost somebody and therefore you're out of practice at dating, quite frankly, and you do need to practice dating. It's a skill. It's a learned skill. And I think very often I see widows rush in and they've been exchanging 5 messages and they're in love and they're moving to the other side of the country. And but you've never actually met. And it's like my advice would be move it to a date pretty quickly. Obviously
yeah,
a date in a public place, in a safe place, etc. But
yeah,
but, I think the problem is if you end up with a pen pal for a few weeks, you can have fallen for somebody who isn't actually until you meet face to face, you don't
yeah,
know if that chemistry is there. You don't know if that person is who they say they are, or if actually that photo of them is 10 years old, or they're twice the size. Camera angles can do amazing things, can't they? And we've all been caught out in that kind of way in the past. So yeah, move it straight fairly quickly. I've got to practice flirting again, I think. I think that's the bit
mm,
that, you know, remember the fun, enjoy it as well. I think that's a really important thing is enjoy the dating aspect. It's very easy, I think, to slip back into, I pulled up my boyfriend on this a few weeks ago. It's almost like within 3 or 4 weeks, I'm starting to say, it's like, well, no, I don't want to be your wife. I know that's what you're missing, but that's not what I want to be. I want you to take me out and wine and dine me. And,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
I don't want to. I don't want you to treat me like porcelain and like a wife and respect me. And I want you to flirt with me and a bit of fun along the way. So I think enjoy it, have fun, but obviously stay safe. I think honesty and communication is key. We've as widows and widowers, we've been through the mill. And we're all a little bit broken and a little bit hurt. And so don't be afraid to talk openly and honestly Communication is key. As long as you're talking and honest with each other, then hopefully no one's going to get hurt. Please be aware that who you're dating is probably quite fragile. There'll be key dates and anniversaries and
Mhm.
milestones, and you might be at different stages in your widow journey. So I'm 8 years in, my partner is 5 years in. So, he's got a whole new load. He's also at a different life stage to me. So he's got young teenagers. I've got an older teenager. So being aware of all those different factors and going into things honestly, openly, and with good intention, I think.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I suspect can easily happen is that, and I think it can happen not just with widows and widowers, but also just anyone who's been in a long marriage that's gotten divorced, is that often people try to recapture what they had previously.
Yeah.
And I suspect that's more true if you've lost your partner through death rather than
Mhm.
just through divorce.
Yeah.
In that you may have had the most wonderful marriage and thought, I want that wonderful marriage back again,
Mhm.
instead of thinking, well, what could a different kind of relationship look like at this stage of life? You
Yeah.
know, do
Absolutely.
I want to live with somebody,
Mhm.
or do I not? You know, do I want to go on multiple dates before, or do I want to be monogamous or not monogamous? And I think when I speak to people, often they just go immediately towards what they're familiar with
Indeed.
instead of thinking about what the future might look like if it was just something totally different.
And I think, relationships are totally different now than they are, than they were when I was originally dating. So there's things like polyamory and, people don't date exclusively anymore from the get-go, and all of those factors in modern dating that is so different, and I can see myself never living with anyone else again. It's like
Yeah.
I've done that part of my life, and a huge respect for Woody Allen and Mia Farrow, who live next door to each other for however many years. I think that's the secret to a happy marriage, probably. I think, yeah, not to slide back into patterns and to kind of challenge the norm, really, I guess, and ask yourself very honestly, what do I want next? You
Yeah, yeah.
know, and be almost selfish in your intent in the beginning of, it's gotta work for you, and you are very different than you were 20 to 30 years ago, and I think that's the key to building something that's successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly find, I don't know if this is just me, but I find it seems to be that men are more drawn to wanting to go the full thing back into marriage and living together and everything. And women I know are very much like, no, no, we don't need to do that. I
Mhm.
don't need to wash your socks and your knickers and all that sort of stuff. I don't.
Yeah, and we also find interestingly, we surveyed a big survey of all of our members, and men, when we talk about widows, we don't talk about moving on, we talk about moving forward. So you don't move on, you move forward.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting that most men had moved forward, shall we say, within 4 weeks of their passing of their wives, whereas most women were waiting 2 years. And I think that tells you everything you need to know about the difference
Wow.
between men are from Mars and women are Venus. So yes, men are not very good at being on their own.
No, no. I think, well, I just think, it's that women make their lives very easy
Yeah.
often, because often when women live with men, they take on a lot of the household chores and the and the stuff that men realize when they're living on their own. Oh shit. I've got to cook my own meals. I've got to like wash my own clothes. I've got to like clean my apartment. I got to do all this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And they're like, when women were around, a lot of that was being done for them. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm being very, gender
Yeah, but
specific because that's not always true. But in a lot of cases, especially I suspect if you're older, that
yeah.
women take on quite a few of the sort of more traditional roles. And so when they don't have to, I know that I'm certainly not in any rush to live with anyone. And every time somebody's gotten close to either moving in without my kind of that was a COVID situation. Somebody moved in because, it was COVID and,
Mhm.
like, that was gonna be the easier thing to do, but very quickly deteriorated. In my mind, he loved it. He loved it because I think the other thing is, and maybe again, this was just specific to my relationship, but I created structure
Mhm.
around our days. So,
Mhm.
there was breakfast, there was lunch, there was dinner, there was a structure to the day that I was just used to, and he was a person that hadn't had much structure.
Yeah.
So when he was given structure and boundaries, he really liked that.
Mhm.
It just meant he knew where he was,
Yeah,
he knew
yeah.
what was happening, right? So, but yeah, I think it's interesting that men so quickly want to get back into relationships and women are a bit more circumspect and a bit more, "Nah, I don't need to do that
Yeah.
immediately."
Yeah. Indeed.
And is your current partner, would he like to go the whole moving in, or is he happy with your
Well,
situation at the moment?
it's interesting because my son is 18 and is heading off to university next September, and I'd always assumed that he would go to Manchester University because there's a very good fashion course here, and that's what he's doing. And then he went to London and fell in love with London, so he's going to London in September. So my partner's first question to me was, "So when are you moving in then?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not. There is absolutely no way I am coming to parent a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old, a step parent, a 13 and 16-year-old, when I'm just getting rid of an 18-year-old and about to enter the best phase of my life, It's like, it's all of a sudden I've got freedom again. And yeah, I mean, Finn's joking that I have a better sex life than he does, you know. So it is, it's absolutely not happening. And I think he would, because for him that would be a nice, neat solution, and it would give the kids. Now,
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to play fun stepmommy and take them out to the cinema and the theme parks, but I am absolutely not being, wicked stepmother, insists they do their homework. So, but yeah, it's an interesting one. But no, I have no intention of giving up my fabulous city centre apartment and the freedom that comes with it.
No, I am totally with you on this one. You are a woman after my own heart. I have no intention of doing, in fact, even my parents have said to me after the guy I was with died, the first one died, they said to me, "You're not having anyone move in with you again, are you? You're not gonna do that anymore, unless you're living in, like, a castle and you
Yeah,
each have separate wings." And I was like, "No, no, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not doing that anymore. You don't have to worry about that." And then, of course, the
yeah,
pandemic came
London.
along.
Yeah,
No, I'm totally with you, like, especially when like you said, your kids are flying the nest, and
mhm,
then, someone's still at home nesting, like, they can carry on doing that,
yeah,
right? The guy that I'm kinda with, he's got a son living with him who's 27 or 28 or something, and, I think it works for both of them, and at first I was like, "Oh, what's happening with him moving out and everything?" And then I realized nothing's happening with that,
mhm,
and actually they l
right,
I think he just likes having the company, to be
yeah,
honest, and when he wants to be by when I wanna go over, he just tells him to leave,
yeah, yeah,
which is fine. It's fine. I've never met the guy, and I'm not likely to, so, yeah, it's okay. But, yeah, I mean, I just think whatever works, but, like I said, whatever works at this stage
mhm,
of life, it can be quite different from what it was
yeah,
when
absolutely.
you're bringing up kids and have a family and everything. So
Mhm.
what's the next big step for you with all of this?
In terms of the dating apps,
Yeah.
or yeah, I mean, I've just launched, a dating app for the sober community called Sober Love. So
Oh, wow.
I'm in recovery, and I realized that dating sober is a challenge, and
Yep.
a challenge similar to that of widows and widowers. And so we've just launched that. So that's all quite exciting. And obviously we've launched the Widow Collective, which is the community site. So yeah, keeping out of trouble, keeping busy, enjoying dating, looking forward to my first kind of Christmas with my new partner. So, although we're not spending the whole Christmas together, but so looking forward to the festive season. But yeah, no, it's exciting times at the moment, definitely.
Sounds great. Well, Nikki, it's been really great to talk to you.
It's been lovely. Thank you so
Good
much.
luck with chapter 2 and Widow's Fire and Sober Love. It sounds like you've got a lot on your plate.
I do.
Can't wait to hear about more success stories and people finding love at this stage of life. I always think, doesn't matter what age you are, you can always
No,
find somebody.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. It's been a delight to chat.
Thank you.
Thanks.